So we've seen the results, we've seen the verdict for the 20 series cards, and the 2080 Ti seems like the one that makes the most sense, even though it's way too expensive for the performance gain that you get. But that's not what we're here to do. What we are here to do is see if we can make this thing better. Maybe we can get it closer to the performance difference, the performance price delta, if you will, by hybridizing it. So what we are going to do is pull this thing apart again, and you can see the previous videos for why that's annoying, and put a liquid cooler on it, if we can figure that out. This will be part one, where we build it up, figure out how to make a liquid cooler fit forcibly, and then we'll do a part two, where we have the thermal testing results, and see, does it gain us any meaningful performance versus the stock card. Before that, this video is brought to you by EVGA's RTX 2080 Ti XE Ultra video card. We recently used this to beat our Founders Edition overclocking results with its additional power target headroom and cooling capabilities. The XE Ultra uses a 2.7 extra thick heatsink for quiet operation under low loads, but also maintains higher clocks on average over the FE model. Learn more at the link in the description below. So quick note on how these things work then. They are thermally constrained and also constrained by current and power limitations. The biggest constraint we have faced is unfortunately power, and liquid cooling can't fix that. But it can stabilize the frequency, and we might be able to get it a bit higher because the frequency temperature curve that NVIDIA has for the 20 series is really similar to Boost 3.0, where just by dropping temperature like a couple degrees, ambient temperature that is, and feeding the card cooler temperature, putting more fans on it, we were able to get the score in times by extreme a bit higher. And part of that is you see temperature frequency scaling at about 63 degrees. You see it again at something like 70 degrees, see it again at 79, 83, 84, and then 87. And so at least once every 10 degree increment, you will see a clock increase as you drive temperature down. We are going to see how far does that go. And at what point is it just impossible to improve given the current limitations? And then maybe we can try a shunt mod and see if that helps us out by using liquid metal to short the shunts on the card, see if NVIDIA has figured out how to block that venue of improving the hardware at this time. We have to go through this again. So the card has to be disassembled for the 18th time. You can see here it's getting a little beat up now. Let's just go ahead and time this, speed it up one more time to see if I'm any faster than last time. So 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, time on that. Might be a little slower than last time, where it was like 5 minutes something. But either way, it's taken apart again. So now it is time to start working on the actual hybrid part of the mod. This is not difficult at this point. We've done it several times now. But first of all, thank you to, they're not a sponsor for this video or anything, but we have much appreciated iFixit's iFixit Pro Tech Toolkit for all of these things. I'm just gonna give them a shout out because it's gotten a lot of use in the last week, and the speed up from having that toolkit has been significant, and we'll link it below if you wanna grab one. But they did sponsor our tool wall behind me, so I'll just point that out too. Anyway, here's the card, and it is now time to get rid of the cooler and start working on improving everything. So first thing we need to do is figure out hole spacing, which I think is 96 millimeters, 98? No. Oh, this is, wait a minute. Oh, okay, I see. So these holes are the ones that are used. There are two sets of holes. One's for the base plate, one is for the actual cooler on the GPU. Officially, these wider ones are the GPU holes, and that's 97.5. Let's just call it 98. Let's call it 98. So 98 millimeters on those. And then if we went with the inner diameter, which I guess we could do, that would be 73. So need to figure out if we have any mounting brackets that will fit that size. We have some brackets for different coolers in these drawers, and we've used various assortments of these for previous hybrid mods like the Vega cards. We're not particularly easy. We actually, for those, we took one of these, actually the Intel version of this bracket, and we drilled holes into it for Vega. And that was a special mod, but let's just check the hole spacing on each of these. Oh, wow. So this is 103. 103 millimeters on this inner diameter of the Intel bracket. So that's not going to work. If we cut it down to 98, I think the AMD bracket we made might work, the Vega one. No, I don't know, maybe. That's like, if we cut a hole right next to the existing hole, we could get that to work. So let's put that as a maybe. These aren't great because they're not square. They're rectangular. So, could use the Be Quiet one. That's a better option. These are kind of customizable. These are from some Deep Cool kit. So potentially could use that. Could also, 72 millimeter hole spacing would work, but we'd have to drill holes for that too. And that, I think, that would be inside of the inner diameter of the ring, so that's not going to work either. Okay, so let's see if the Be Quiet kit will just mount on here cleanly. Here we have our wall of GPUs. These are all NVIDIA on the green trays, AMD's on the yellow trays. What I'm going to do right now is pull just a Pascal one. I can't remember the exact hole spacing on this. And check that, because that will help give me an idea if any of my previous mods would work on this one. Spacing here is 82 millimeters, 81, 82 for that outer diameter. So we might be able to get away with an Arctic kit, maybe. Or the EVGA. No, I don't think the EVGA one will work, but that's a maybe. AMD cards, let's pull a Vega card. That's 90, so that's roughly 90 millimeters. So that's not, we may end up taking the approach that we use for Vega and custom drilling something. That'd kind of suck if so. But I think first we're gonna try the Be Quiet kit and just see if we get lucky, because that one's got sliders instead of screw holes. So having a slider for the screw gives us more room to play. And we have the Be Quiet loop up here. So I'm gonna grab that. That is the Silent Loop 280. We've been using this for hybrid mods since we got it. For the Vega cards most recently, no, Titan V most recently got this. And the Intel Hades Canyon one, which have to be very careful about the mounting tension using this, because you can start cracking the PCB if you go too hard on it. So we gotta be careful. Let's see if this fits. EVGA told us their hybrid would be available in October, so of course we have to one-up them on their own product and make our own first. Damn, that's very close to working. But the holes aren't quite lining up. So I'm gonna leave that thermal paste on there for now. All we're doing is just checking contact anyway. And I'm gonna grab some more hardware screws out of the drawer and nuts and bolts and see if we can get this together. So let's try like some packs of these machine screws or something. I'll just note this for anyone who doesn't already know, gotta plug it of course. The GN mod mat on the table here is what we're working on. This is a product we make and sell on store.gamersnexus.net, specifically for modding purposes, for anti-static properties, but also it's just a really cool surface with some power pin out diagrams, stuff like that. So I found a bag I labeled Titan V. So that's fortunate. Kept those together, I guess knew they'd be coming out again. So these, I could get a different nut to work with those and it would be fine, but in an effort of saving a trip to the hardware store, let's see if these will work instead. That looks good. And that looks good as well. Okay. Have to be kind of careful with mounting this to not apply too much force pulling on it in one direction. So we're just going to mount it and then pull it apart just to see if these things even fit together. This is always fun. Oh man, that might work. That would make this really easy. I think that's going to work. Is this the same? Let me check if this is the same hole spacing as the Titan V actually. Because I can't remember how that hole spacing was. That one had HBM on it, so it's significantly different in that aspect. But it looks like it might be the same. Pretty damn close, if not the same. 98. Nice. Okay, cool. So now that we know the hole spacing is the same, we can proceed with some relative confidence. and just apply the same exact mounting hardware to this thing. Remember this, one side was much harder to screw in than the others. I think I went the opposite way on the Titan V, but let's just try this. That's just because of clearance issues. Obviously this cooler is not meant to be used this particular way. I don't think Be Quiet officially endorses this use of their cooler. Okay, so it looks like this is gonna work, and now I just have to pull the cooler back off and put thermal paste on there because we have the old paste on, but this will definitely fit. And the cooler's already got some Corsair maglev fans on it from the Titan V mod, so we're good there, good to go in all aspects. VRAM, this can get some cooling from direct air. NVIDIA's reference PCB, or VRAM I should say, is actually good enough that we don't need really direct contact cooling. We can just use airflow. So this VRAM will be fine even without any fins on it, and just blasting it with air will be more than sufficient. It'll be better than the stock cooler anyway. And we took stock cooler VRM temperature measurements. We can do that again and just see, does it look like it's doing worse than it was before? And if it is, we can account for it by putting some aluminum fins on there. But I think we're good here. So at this point, I'm just gonna take this back off, clean the thermal paste, put new thermal paste on there, and then we can move forward with getting this thing in a system and figuring out what we're gonna do with it. So reveal the TU102 GPU once again. This is a 300A model. It is factory overclocked, of course, because it's a Founders Edition card, but we're going to do a lot more than the factory. We're just going to run into current limitations, I think. And if I want to fix that, I guess we can try shunt mods next, but I want to go with just straight power, or thermal testing first, then power testing next if we want to do that. The shunts, though, just for reference, we have one over here on the PCB, that 5 milliohm shunt. So that's one of them. And then we have another shunt right there, 5 milliohm shunt. And on the backside, in this area on the backside, there's a third one. And those will correspond to the connectors. Actually, I should check. I'll just check right now and see where specifically does each resistor correspond with the power connectors. We're just going to do a resistance check. I think one of the previous times I demonstrated this with the right idea, but the wrong practical application. So I'm going to correct that this time and show you the right way to do it. That's the multimeter we're using. And then we have, I'm just going to show you, we have a cable here with exposed wire scheme. And if we plug that in, this is a 6, is this? No, this is an 8-pin. We can plug this into an 8-pin power header. And you'll see that we have the black or the ground ones up facing me. And that will correspond with these pins here. So if we look at the pinout, these correspond with the top line, which again is ground or black, and going down here. And then the inner line in here will correspond with yellow, which is 12 volt, as you can see indicated by the yellow cables. So that's your 12 volt. And if we reference our GN mod mat, which again is on store.gamersnexus.net over here, what we're trying to do is find the one of the 12 volts and test it for resistance versus one of the shunt resistors. And in doing so, we'll learn if those are in a direct line to each other. So we can test one of these versus the shunt resistor, and what we're looking for is zero resistance, or that they are continuous. So let's start with this one. I'm just going to probe the top side of this, and we're going to go for the 12 volt on the inside here, 0.2 for the resistance on the multimeter. And just as a demonstration, let's see if these are continuous. They probably should not be, but let's find out. Not continuous. So you'll see on the same pin on the other connector, the same pin in terms of the pinout, we're getting numbers all over the place. And it is not continuous. These are not connected. So this shunt resistor corresponds to this particular power header. That would be the one on the left facing down on the card. Because when I probe it, you'll see 0.2. When it's not touching anything, it's 0L. And then if we grab something completely different, you'll see very variable resistance reported. So this one corresponds to that. Let's see what this corresponds to. No, these are not continuous. That might correspond with the PCIe slot. Is this a shunt resistor? No. Well, we need to get rid of that anyway. That's not a shunt resistor. There's a third one on the back. So for this one, continuous. Those are continuous. So this shunt resistor, let's just double check, yes. This shunt resistor corresponds to, you can see it's basically 0 readout there. So this one down here, if we probe that versus the other power header, you'll see it reports back 0.1, 0.2. And if we look at again at our pinout diagram, that's going to be a 12 volt versus the shunt resistor. So that's one of these and one of these versus the resistor. So that is, backside corresponds to the other pinout, front side top corresponds to the left one, and then the bottom probably goes down to the PCIe slot. But we're not going to play with those today. Today we're just doing the liquid cooling. Probably after that we'll look at a potential shunt mod and see if we can lift some of the current limitations on the card. We're not really sure. It depends on how strict NVIDIA was, if they put in any intelligence in there to try and stop us. Clean enough. Actually, little cleaner. That's clean enough. Okay. So let's get some thermal paste on here. If anyone complains about too much thermal paste, I encourage you to watch our too much thermal paste video where we prove your comments wrong preemptively. So here's the thing with GPUs. With GPUs, you want too much thermal paste because you want this to spread and just sink in over here. And the reason for that is if there's even a little bit of the die exposed, and BuildZoid has talked about this in his own content because he's done it, you can kill the GPU core. You kill parts that are on there by them running too hot versus the rest of it, because there's no guarantee, it's the wrong hole, there's no guarantee that the particular piece of circuitry you have failed to cool is covered by over temperature protections. Not everything on the card is covered by those protections. So this is a sufficient amount of thermal paste. It will spread and cover the whole die. And we have a shot, I think, maybe we can drop it in, where I did the too much thermal paste with that Thermal Grizzly Cryonaut actually right onto an Intel CPU. And even when we did that in testing, there was no difference. The only difference is some of it gets into the socket, which kind of sucks when you remove the CPU. But otherwise, there's no downside in terms of thermals. So all we're doing is protecting potential lack of coverage, which would kill something. God damn it. It's the wrong fucking hole again. Now, the other reason for doing, quote, too much thermal paste on this is because I know it's going to be a slip and slide while I'm trying to apply the cooler. This thing's going to slide around a bit, and so by having extra on there, it allows me some error where as I'm applying it and it's sliding around because it's not meant to be applied to this device, we'll still have some thermal paste in there for sure that will make coverage between the die and the cold plate. Now, after doing this, I'm going to remove the thermal pads that are on the devices still, set them aside, and we are instead just going to blast air straight at the VRAM components and the GDDR6. You see it's kind of moving around as I'm applying that, but because we put so much thermal paste on there, I'm confident that there will be enough where we're not lacking coverage in any particular spot and potentially exposing the die to permanent damage. So we'll be good on that. And then again, VRAM, that'll be cooled by direct air and direct air only. So now, I just need to tighten these down and we'll be done. Okay, so what I'm gonna do here is make sure everything's hand tight. We're not gonna go more than that because it's pretty easy to start bending the PCB. We really don't wanna bend it. It's okay to have a little bend in there, but we'd wanna relieve that stress right away because it can cause damage to the internal circuitry. You can, for example, create memory artifacting if you crack some of the lines in there. It's not warped presently, so we're good. I'm just gonna measure, get a depth gauge here and measure how long through I've pushed each of these screws and make sure they're all even for even spreading of force. So that's 11.54 millimeters. Wow, nice. That is also 11.54. This is where we're sitting right now. 11.54 millimeters on those two. So this is just to spread the load evenly, spread the force evenly across all 4 screws so that we don't have one that strains any part of the PCB more than the other, potentially causing it to crack. This one needs to come through a bit more. I'm actually going to lock this at 11.54. So those are all even now. I'm just going to look at the board and see if there's any warping of the PCB. So I would say that there's no meaningful warping of the PCB going on. The straight edge lines up with it. So there's our hybrid mod. Way easier than the previous ones we've done with Vega FE, Titan V, some of the others even. But still, the EVGA old GPU CLCs do not fit on this, which is unfortunate because we like working with them. They're much easier to use. But we got the Be Quiet one on here, the CLC 280. It's what we use for the Titan V. Same hole spacing, I think, as the Titan V. And we've got 2 maglev fans on it, the Corsair ML140s. And then we're just going to remove the thermal pads and blast the thing with a lot of air from top down and from the front. It'll be fine. It'll be better, probably, GPU thermals or VRM thermals than the FE version of the card with this big thing on it. So we'll see how it does. I don't know. Like, the temperature will definitely be better. That much is clear. For sure, the thermals will be better. It just becomes a question of, do those really get us anything for clocks? Does it get us any performance? And it should, but it might be single-digit percentages. I don't know. It's going to come down to how hard is this board current limited versus some of the previous models. And if we run out of any room whatsoever to do anything with, we might just go ahead and try a shunt mod. So check back for that. As always, subscribe for more. This is part 1. Part 2 will have the results. Need to do a lot of testing on it. It'll take about a day or so. So check back for that. You can go to store.gamersnexus.net to grab the mod mat we used in this video if you found it interesting or useful for your own projects. It's meant to protect the table more or less is the primary goal, and also the parts on it. And of course, patreon.com/gamersnexus helps out directly in that method. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all next time.